Have you ever stopped to think about how weird it is that you can lie to yourself and actually fall for it? I mean, it sounds like an impossible crime, right? A perfect psychological mystery. And yet, we all do it. So today, we're going full-on detective. We're investigating one of the mind's biggest secrets, self-deception. We're going to figure out how we manage to be both the con artist and the victim all at the same time.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll examine the crime itself, that central paradox that makes self-deception seem totally impossible. Then we'll line up the prime suspects, the big theories that try to explain it all. After that, we're going to get our hands on the playbook, the actual methods our minds use. Then we'll uncover the motives, and even see what happens when we all lie to ourselves together. And finally, we'll deliver the verdict. Are we actually to blame for any of this?
Okay, first things first, the scene of the crime. The fundamental problem with self-deception is that it just seems logically impossible. It's like trying to successfully hide from yourself when you're also the one who's seeking. How does that even work?
And this definition really gets to the heart of it. To pull off a deception, you have to know the real truth, right? But to be deceived, you have to believe the lie. So how on earth can one mind do both of those things at the exact same time? This is the central puzzle that has kept philosophers and psychologists up at night for centuries.
So this big problem really breaks down into two separate, very tricky paradoxes. First, you've got the static paradox. This is all about your state of mind. How can you, in the same moment, believe that P is true and also that P is not true? It's a total contradiction. Then you have the dynamic paradox, which is about the process, the act of tricking yourself. If you're the one setting the trap, you know where it is, you know how it works. So how can you possibly fall for it? It's like trying to surprise yourself with a surprise party that you planned. The whole strategy just falls apart.
So to solve this impossible crime, investigators basically have two prime suspects, two leading theories. The big question is self-deception a deliberate, calculated plan? Or is it something way more subtle, like a subconscious bias that just gently guides us toward a more comfortable lie?
On one side, you have the intentionalists. They argue that, yeah, we actively and intentionally choose to deceive ourselves. It's a conscious decision. But on the other side, you have the non-intentionalists, and they say, whoa, not so fast. They think there's no grand plan at all. Instead, our own powerful desires, our fears, our anxieties, they act like a powerful magnet, just quietly pulling our thoughts and bending how we look at evidence, until we end up believing what we want to be true, all without ever consciously deciding to do it.
Okay, so if it's possible, how in the world does the mind actually pull it off? What are the specific tactics? What are the plays? Well, let's crack open the playbook and see the step-by-step guide to this perfect inner con.
So the first method is basically a long con, and its secret weapon is time. Just imagine a corrupt official who knows they've done something wrong, so they consciously decide to cover it up. They shred the real documents and plant fake ones. Then they just wait. They let time do its work. Months, maybe years pass. Their memory of that original cover-up starts to fade. And then when an investigation finally happens, they discover their own fake evidence and genuinely believe they're innocent. They use time to build a wall between their deceiving self and their now deceived self. Method 2 is the classic inside job. This theory says our mind isn't just one big open space. It's more like an office with cubicles, with partitions. So a hidden subconscious part of you knows the painful truth. Let's say that a loved one is seriously ill. That part then goes to work to protect your conscious mind. It hides the truth and promotes a more comforting false belief that everything will be okay. It literally creates a boundary inside your own head. The deceiver and the deceived are just two parts of you operating at the same time.
And finally, there's the third method, the non-intentional one, the motivated mistake. And with this one, there's no conspiracy. It's just a bunch of small, unconscious errors in judgment, all driven by what we want to be true. So, picture a parent who desperately wants to believe their kid is a genius. When they see an A+ on the test, they treat it like absolute proof. But when they see a D, they immediately find excuses. Oh, the teacher must be unfair, or it was just an off day. Their desire is biasing how they weigh the evidence, tipping the scales until they land on the conclusion they wanted all along, all without ever deciding to lie to themselves.
So we have the methods, but that brings us to the biggest question in any investigation, right? The motive. Why? Why would our minds develop this incredibly complicated and risky trick? What's the payoff for fooling ourselves?
Well, one of the most powerful motives might come from evolution. A theory from biologist Robert Trivers suggests that we lie to ourselves in order to become better liars to other people.
Think about it. When you tell a conscious lie, you risk giving off all those little tells, a shaky voice, darting eyes, sweating. But if you first convince yourself that the lie is true, all those tells just vanish. You can lie with the genuine conviction of someone telling the truth, and that gives you a massive advantage in the social world for getting resources, finding a partner, you name it. In this view, self-deception isn't a flaw, it's a feature for social survival.
The other major motive is all about psychology. We do it to escape the pain of what's called cognitive dissonance. You know that deeply uncomfortable, kind of cringy feeling you get when your actions don't match your values? Like you believe in being healthy, but you smoke a cigarette. Or you care about the environment, but you drive a car that gets terrible gas mileage. That conflict creates real mental stress, and self-deception is a super effective way to make it go away. You just tell yourself, one cigarette won't kill me, or my one little car doesn't really make a difference. The lie isn't for anyone else, it's to make you feel okay again. And we can see this exact thing playing out in the real world. This table here comes from a study looking at why people who say they value sustainability often don't act that way. They feel that internal conflict, and they resolve it with these very specific types of excuses. You can see the clusters: economic rationalization, your basic practical excuses; institutional dependency, which is basically pushing the blame onto the government; and developmental realism, using little mental tricks to let yourself off the hook.
And the data here really tells a story. Look at that first bar. By a huge margin, our go-to justification is economic rationalization. It costs too much. It's inconvenient. I'm just too busy. These everyday practical excuses are the #1 lie we tell ourselves to close that gap between what we believe and what we do. It's a perfect snapshot of self-deception in the wild, all driven by that desire to stop feeling like a hypocrite.
You know, so far we've been talking about self-deception like it's a solo act, a private crime. But now the investigation widens. What happens when our inner cons go public? What happens when a whole group of us starts believing the same convenient lie together?
This is what we call collective self-deception. It's not that a group has one giant mind, but that a whole bunch of individuals are all deceiving themselves in the same way at the same time. And here's the crucial part. Each person's self-deception gets amplified and supported by everybody else's. It creates this powerful feedback loop. Your comforting lie feels way more true when you look around and see that everyone you know believes it too. It makes the lie that much stronger.
And let's look at a huge, global example. Most of us are generally aware that our consumption habits have some pretty serious environmental costs. That knowledge creates that uncomfortable dissonance. So, to cope, we often adopt a set of collective beliefs. We tell ourselves that the problem is probably exaggerated, or that our own personal choices don't really matter in the grand scheme of things, or that small things like recycling are good enough. And when you're surrounded by people who all share and repeat these exact same justifications, it creates an echo chamber that protects everyone from the uncomfortable truth. The whole group becomes an accomplice in the con.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the toughest part of our investigation. After looking at the methods, the motives, and the conspiracies, who's responsible? When we lie to ourselves, are we morally on the hook for the consequences? It's time to deliver the verdict.
And the verdict is, well, it's split. If you're an intentionalist, the answer is a pretty clear yes. You chose to lie to yourself, so you're responsible for what happens because of it. Simple as that. But for the non-intentionalists, it's way more complicated. If the whole process is subconscious, how can you be blamed? Well, their argument is subtle. They say that while you might not directly control the bias, you can be held responsible for the character flaws, the epistemic vices that let that bias run wild. We're talking about things like intellectual cowardice, or laziness, or just a lack of guts to face a hard truth. So maybe we don't choose the lie, but we are responsible for not trying harder to find the truth.
So if we do have some responsibility here, what can we do about it? How do we fight back against our own mind's tendency to trick itself? Well, the key is to cultivate what philosophers call epistemic virtues. That's just a fancy way of saying we need to practice good mental habits. Things like being impartial with evidence, staying vigilant about our own biases, and just being careful about how we form our beliefs. But it's not just an inside job. It's also about cultivating your community, surrounding yourself with people you actually trust to call you out, to challenge those comforting beliefs, and to hold you accountable.
And that brings our investigation to a close, but it kicks off a new one for you. We've unmasked the methods, we've found the motives, and we've delivered the verdict on this inner con. So the final question isn't for me, it's for you. As you go about your day, take a second to be a detective of your own mind and just ask yourself, what convenient lie are you telling yourself today?